Hello there and welcome to our guest segment on Africa Business Radio. So the federal government says it plans to borrow more to fund its budget for 2022, while it will spend more to service the growing debt as a result. The Director General, DMO, Patient Oniha, noted that the debt stock would keep increasing as revenue is declining. This, however, has been a subject of controversy in recent times. Well, joining me to talk about Nigeria's debt profile is the Managing Director, Rigo Microfinance Bank, and Business AM columnist, Mr Adolphus Aletor. Good morning, sir. It's great to have you on the show.
Good morning, Rachel. My pleasure.
All right, so I picked an interest in the article you left up on Business AM, which is why we're here at this time. In that article, titled Why Nigeria Must Keep Borrowing, there you drew a relationship between the three concepts of debt to GDP ratio, revenue to GDP ratio, and debt service coverage ratio. Can you please shed more light on these concepts and what role each of them play in making borrowing a decision, so we can move forward to, why we need to even keep borrowing in Nigeria?
Okay, Rachel. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on this program. For me, it's a privilege and an honor to be invited to your prestigious station.
Glad to have you.
Speak to some of the articles that I'm putting up on Business AM. The issue of borrowing has become has become of great concern to everybody. Nigeria belongs to all of us. We would not sit in one place and continue to see borrowing decisions made without trying to let the government know what we feel about it. So I've sat down and I've listened to many commentaries. I've listened to government officials, top government officials. I've listened to some analysts, argue in favor of borrowing. Even this morning, I've had also the privilege of hearing an argument that debt to GDP ratio, is there's still a wide headroom, and people make the mistake, to compare us with America. And, it just occurred to me that I needed to, add my own voice to this discussion. You see, for every borrowing decision, there are key elements that must be taken into consideration. Fortunately, the proponents of continuous borrowing in Nigeria have stuck to the use of the debt to GDP ratio as a single decision or a singular factor for taking that borrowing decision. And what does debt to GDP ratio means? It means that if you take, for instance, the total production that goes on in Nigeria, and then you match it against the stock of our debt, what is the relationship? Okay, so today we are told that the relationship between them is still less than 25%, between 17% to 25%. And somebody says, if we haven't even done 50%, we haven't even done 17%. So it means that if it begins to exceed 77%, the economy will start to decline by 2%. Okay, so the fact that a bank has loan products for everybody doesn't mean that you should just go ahead and take that loan product.
Right.
So the fact that there are loans out there for Nigeria to borrow doesn't mean that we should just go ahead and take the loan. Besides that, there are other factors that can influence your borrowing decision. And that's why I'm saying this morning that the fact that we have a low debt to GDP ratio is not sufficient reason for us to continue to borrow.
Right.
Now, we have looked at also the volume of revenue that we generate. Many people are concerned that our revenue is low. Okay, our revenue potential is low, and we keep borrowing. Even the IMF says, or the World Bank says, that for you to guarantee economic growth, poverty reduction, or eradication, your revenue to GDP should not be less than 15%. I don't hear this argument a lot. And it will interest you to know that Nigeria is just doing about 7 to 8%. So we can't meet our revenue to GDP ratio, which World Bank has said should be about 15%. But we keep pushing the fact that our debt to GDP ratio is less than what is recommended by the World Bank. Countries like America, China, Japan, and co., even the UK, are doing quite a lot in terms of debt to GDP. Okay? Venezuela, for instance, is doing about 350%. But you and I know where Venezuela is today. Japan is doing about 266%. America is doing about 108%. The UK is doing about 100% in terms of debt to GDP. So it tells you that these countries are countries that are heavy when it comes to borrowing. Right. But we won't blindly take that decision to follow them, because they have a separate, when it comes to statistics, revenue statistics, theirs are ahead of that of Nigeria. For instance, America specifically had revenue to GDP of 24.5%, and America, that we are saying has about 108% of debt to GDP, is having about 24.5%, far ahead of what the World Bank has recommended. Right. In fact, all OECD countries, they have an average of 33.8%. Okay, so which means life is good. European Union countries have about 41%. So it means life is good. If you come to Africa, Algeria has about 33%. South Africa has about 29%. Morocco has 26%. Okay? You see, I hate to read out figures, but at times you are constrained to keep looking at these figures because they talk to you. Côte d'Ivoire has about 20%. Nigeria has less than 10%. We're talking about between 7 and 8% here. And then we still hear commentators talk about, let's keep borrowing because there's so much headroom. But they have forgotten this part of it, that they need to generate enough revenue to be able to borrow. Okay? Now, yes, have a look at that revenue. Then you look at the debt service, the one we call debt servicing coverage ratio. That simply means that, look, when you borrow and you are repaying, there must be a limit to which your repayment. So, for instance, in Nigeria, we say there's a common law in the labor law that says, when an employee borrows money and is to repay, his repayment must not exceed 33% of his salary. Why did you think the law provided that? The law does not want you to borrow and eventually go sorrowing. Because if you use your whole revenue, your whole month's salary to service your debt, then eventually you begin to live from hand to mouth. So that's why the labor law in Nigeria says your repayment of any loan as an employee must not exceed 33.3%. So even as lenders in Nigeria, we use this as a benchmark. We ensure that when customers come to borrow, their repayment does not exceed their 33% of their income. So as a country, why should we not take this into consideration? In fact, as a matter of fact, Nigeria has reported to have spent about 98% of its revenue to service debt between January and May this year, 2021. Okay, and it doesn't augur well for the country. It puts a lot of things out of shape when we continue to borrow without taking these three concepts into consideration. I think that is just those three concepts I want the government to always have at the back of their mind when they do such.
Right, this makes a lot of sense, really, because, time and again, we hear people talking about or comparing Nigeria to other developed countries. We don't even borrow as much as these developed countries, so why are we complaining in the first place? But this is a clearer understanding now, and yes, the government hammers on this particular reason, as to why they keep borrowing more and more. But looking at these very important criteria, which you've just mentioned, it gives a better picture, indicating that Nigeria is having a very horrible debt service to revenue ratio. So there's no reason why, we should compare ourselves with these developed countries or even some other African countries as well. But now, with the place we are at this point, you just mentioned that 98% of our revenue goes to debt servicing. Do you think we are already in a debt trap?
So the answer to that question, if the country is in a debt trap, well, I'm not a politician. I'm just a financial expert. If I was a politician, I'll probably be telling you that, let's keep borrowing, because we need to spend more money for infrastructure. We need to spend more money for recurrent expenditure. Without borrowing, we don't have access to additional funding. But if I were to compare that position to my personal finance, and I see that I get to where I'm starting to spend service debt, I'll simply be tilting to that common saying that says that when you find yourself in a pit, you stop digging. So what that simply means is that you get to a precarious position. You don't deepen that position, that crisis, further. You begin to look for a way out. So I will say that at 98%, maybe on the average 70% to 98, more specific. I think that we may not be in a debt trap yet, but I think we're beginning to head, towards that if we don't up our revenue.
Well, before I just get in what you think we need to do to mitigate all of these risks that we are currently facing, this conversation will not be complete without talking about the IMF's special drawing right. When this one popped up all over social media, a lot of persons thought, oh my God, another loan is already on the way. And there were concerns, surrounding that one. But, with further analysis and all of that and confirmations, I got to understand that this is actually a cost-free asset, right? And so does this mean that it has no impact on the debt profile?
Richard, when you say special drawing right, it's like, in the local parlance, we say when you want to kill a dog, you give it a big name, right? So, as you are, I'm not. You don't need to tell me, but I know that on a daily basis, on a regular basis, you get emails from finance houses asking you to come and access a facility that they've profiled you, and that you're qualified for maybe 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, and you should come and take. So, Rachel, the same thing I'm going to ask. The fact that a finance institution has profiled you and written to you, is that sufficient? All right? So we get such calls every day. Maybe a family member or a ward sends money, passes money through your account. And then the bank, because of AIs, and so picks the turnover up, and they say, hey, this account is doing well. This account can take this loan. The money is not yours, so you're not going to accept that facility. So when you say special drawing right, it's just giving Nigeria a big name, to continue to push us into taking those decisions that ordinarily, we will not take. Okay? So now we talk about, you said, what are the solutions? Solutions are pervasive. All right, you don't have one tool, or you don't have one solution to all these. But if you look at the three elements with which I have analyzed decision making before borrowing, you find out the one that is critical in that place is revenue. So increase your revenue, and then you can take more.
Right.
All right. Now, some of those places I have identified, they are very simple. I'm not going to be telling the government or asking the government to, be jumping up and down and increase tax, to be able to raise funds. Then, for the ones that we already have, there is an integrity issue for the revenue generation strategy that we already have, or platforms that we already have. There are serious integrity issues. And I'm suggesting to the government that we should go back, all right? We should go back and look at the integrity of those channels. For instance, when we say Nigeria generates about 2.4 barrels per day, 2.4 million barrels per day, or how many barrels per day, that is not the total production. More than half of that is lost either to poor process integrity or deliberate corruption on the part of those people that are involved. So I think that Nigeria should go back to that process and look at how they can make it seamless and truthful. Today, we are being told that we are even more of a gas nation than an oil nation. So whatever is happening in the oil sector is also happening in the gas sector. The government needs to go and look at that area. Then I want to conclude by saying that one thing that I discover is happening in this country that government has not given attention is the solid mineral industry. Yeah, government may have given it a bit of attention here and there, but we've found expatriates, we've found foreigners coming to mine all manner of stones, all manner of precious metals, all manner of solid minerals in this country. And I think that the government has not even tapped into the revenue potential of that place. Perhaps, maybe because they are located in very obscure and tough environment. But today, come on, we are doing upstream. Okay, so if we can go into the high seas and drill oil, why can't we go into the forest, into our rocky grounds, and begin to account for those mineral deposits that God has blessed this country with? So I think that there's a lot more that the government needs to do in these green areas, rather than, I won't even talk about tax, I want to talk about increasing tax, because I was trying to do a comparison between tax rates in America and Nigeria, and I realized that personal tax in Nigeria is about 24%, and in America is about 15%, 15.5% to be specific. So we are already heavily taxed as individuals. If you also look at the corporate tax, the combined corporate tax of America is about 25.8%, and that of Nigeria is 30%. So we're already heavily taxed. I think that government should begin to look at green areas where revenues that have potential for increase in revenues, and mining is one of them. Looking at the integrity of our current processes in oil and gas is another. I think that if we work on that, we should be able to attain a certain revenue level that we desire.
Right, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I think, according to everything you've just said, what differentiates countries in debt crisis and those who are borrowing as much as they want but are doing fantastically well is revenue. So the focus should be on debt service to revenue ratio, not to, cling on to the debt to GDP ratio as the reason why, it's okay to keep borrowing because we're in a good place when it comes to the debt to GDP ratio. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Mr. Adolphus. We're looking out for more of your pieces on Business AM, and I do hope you'll be available for us to have further conversations.
Thank you. I'll continue to do my best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was Mr. Adolphus Aletor. He is the Managing Director, Rigo Microfinance Bank, and Business AM columnist. Thank you so much again, sir, for joining us. It's still the Breakfast Connection on Africa Business Radio. I'll be back in just a moment. Stay here.